So a little more detailed description then of the process of going into the past, and then for healing, regression into the past for healing, and then we'll do a divination, and then we'll do a future one as well too. So when you're doing a regression, when you're doing any divination, you first start off by centering yourself in your present awareness through a meditative process, which I'll share with you. So you're starting from the present. So then you send a strand of perception or awareness into the past, and we could call this regression. And in some forms of therapy, most forms of therapy, say hypnotherapy or whatever it may be, you use the present symptom or problem or question that a person has, sometimes it's called the affect bridge, to go to the past wherever it may be. Now maybe it'll take you to your childhood, or maybe it'll take you to what's called perinatal experiences, birth trauma, as Stan Grof and others have written and talked about, or prenatal factors, or it could be ancestral patterns, multi-generational patterns, familial patterns that are handed down through the ancestors, as we know is true, for example, of many illnesses, and increasingly people have been recognizing that ancestral patterns can be psychological patterns that can be transmitted through several generations. It's called multi-generational family systems therapy, works in that area. Or some people would say you might find patterns that go into a past life, and there's a form of therapy called past life therapy, past life regression therapy, where and that's certainly consistent with Eastern teachings, which say we bring into every incarnation the seeds of karmic patterns that we've accumulated in not only genetically, ancestrally, but also in other incarnations. So there's this basic movement of regression to a past, and then there's a kind of a re-experiencing. And sometimes that re-experiencing, if the past experience was very emotionally intense, and the emotion hasn't been processed, it might be a catharsis involving tears and grief and pain and scream, or primal scream, as people have talked about the primal scream. But for healing to take place, there really needs to be an integration, and that's a movement back in the other direction, into the present, right? It's not enough just to keep re-experiencing. It's not enough just to keep doing the primal scream over and over again. And this has been demonstrated. You have to find some way to integrate it into your present, and the way that you know that something has been integrated into your present is that you can then say, okay, that's part of my history, but then I no longer obsess about it. I no longer have nightmares about it, or flashbacks, or panic attacks, or intrusive thoughts and memories coming in. And sometimes that takes a long time to do that, and particularly with traumas like post-traumatic stress disorder. This kind of integration of experiences can take a long time because it may be chronic trauma, the many traumatic experiences experienced over and over again. And I don't need to tell you, but we're living in an age where you have whole populations suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder symptoms, such as our society. A large percentage of our society is actually suffering from post-traumatic stress symptoms following on September 11th. This is no laughing matter. It's extremely serious, and it exists on a collective level. It completely distorts our thinking. So the word that is the best word for this process of bringing it back into the present is called remembering, which is a wonderful word because it means remembering. It's the opposite of dismembering. It means reconnecting. Members are limbs. So this is where trauma, pain, tends to freeze an experience. It means it's not integrated and it's disconnected. So you re-experience it. So it's a fourfold movement. You move from the present into the past, re-experience it, and move it back into the present. And so what then is happening is an expansion of your present field of awareness, right? You then become the person that it can say, well, I'm the person who had that in my history, but I am many other things besides. In that way, it's actually then empowering, you see, rather than being trapped or entangled in the past. We're entangled or trapped or bound to the past to the degree that we haven't processed it through and haven't integrated it.